What is going on, everyone? James there, Bass Layers. Just going to do a quick little video on some facts about bass and bass fishing. Little things that I've learned over the years. Little things that'll help you probably catch bass a little bit more if you're a new bass fisherman or if you're trying to catch more bass in general. So starting out, one thing that I learned over the years: bass do not have eyelids. I know it sounds stupid. I was out on a pond one time with an ex-girlfriend of mine, and her niece was with us, and she said, yeah, all the fish are going to be over in the shade because they don't have eyelids. And I just looked over and I was just like dumbfounded that I didn't think about that before. And so needless to say, the bass need shade because they don't have eyelids. So in the low light hours, the big ones, they can cruise around. You got to understand that those bigger bass, they got really big eyeballs. Sun affects them more. They're going to come out in the low light times, like at night, and they're going to come out in the low light in the morning and the evening. But also those really big fish, they can see really well, and they love to eat in the middle of the day. But you got to know where to catch them. They love to go in the grass. They love to go in the shade spots. They like to go down deep into the depth line where they're low enough down in the water to where the sun's not penetrating down and hurting their eyes. There's also mud lines. I was out at Folsom Lake recently. Boats started coming in, muddying up the whole area. People on jet skis all up and down, and it muddied it all up. And back in the day when we were fishing out there, the bass would get up in the mud line and started catching the crap out of bass in the mud line there at Folsom Lake. Caught a couple really good fish out there. On a crankbait, I would let the spot sit, I'd let the fish do their thing, and I just kept casting right through the same spot and got a couple of them to eat. And it was always right in the middle of these same two bushes that were in this spot where it dropped down in a little ditch. They like to be up against stuff, and they like to be around the cover. Bass also need current. If there's wind blowing, that's good. It'll put oxygen in the water. If there's like pinch points or islands and stuff like that where the water will like go through, that's another like spot where there will be oxygen. Oxygen's also up in the grass. So if you got them up in the grass because they need to cover their eyes, then they also need the oxygen. So that's why they always say the bass are up in the grass. That's where you're gonna find them. They like I said, they like to eat against stuff. They like to eat against the rocks. They like to pin stuff. When they go to eat, they like to pin it against things when they go to eat. The really big ones, they can open their mouth and suck bait in as they're chasing them down and stuff. But most of the time, with the normal bass you're going to catch, they need to eat against something. So they'll eat against the rock. They'll eat against the tree. They will eat against the grass. When they're in the grass, they'll pin them against the grass. I've learned from watching other guys that they will eat also on the shade lines. Where you got shade lines at, they'll sit in the shade and they will come right out and they'll eat on the shade line. It's kind of hard to explain, but they'll sit just to where they're in there because they can't see if the sun's in your eyes. So they'll sit in the shade spot and they'll dart out and they'll get stuff and they'll come back. Caught a lot of fish that way. If you got a lot of grass in your ponds, you're gonna want to fish weedless with like frogs and Senkos, stuff like that. Weedless Texas rig Senko is one of my favorite ways to fish. You can throw them on the top of the muck and run them. If the fish moves and blows up on it, you can shake it in place and they'll come up and eat it, or it will fall through the mat. With a frog, sometimes you can't do that. Frogs will get a bigger bite than a Senko most of the time. You got to be really slow and methodical with the frog. You want to let it sit there, let those legs spread out. Those fish, the really big ones, they'll sit there and they'll look at it and they'll come up really slow, and it'll just be a little bloop. And it's not always giant blow-ups with the frogs. Now, if you're in open water and you don't have much grass in your ponds, or you got little open areas that you can throw stuff like crankbaits and ploppers and chatterbaits, bass love to chase. So they love to chase stuff down. My dog, I used to do this little thing with her. I'd take the ball and I'd bounce the ball for her, and she'd spin in circles and go crazy and chase down the ball. But if I took like her stuffed animal and I'd throw a stuffed animal for her, she'd just walk over all casually and like slowly pick it up and then bring it back. She doesn't react the same when you bounce that ball and it's going up and down and bouncing all through the house. She chases it down. So it's kind of the same thing with like a lipless crankbait or a crankbait or a chatterbait or a plopper, something that's going fast and making a whole bunch of commotion. And for some reason, bass, they just like to chase stuff. If there's one bass there, it might chase it, but if there's a group of bass there, they're all going to fight over it. So you got to remember that too. They're going to be chasing that thing down. I've caught some of my biggest fish ever on like lipless crankbaits, throwing them out and just reeling them in as fast as you can, like as fast as you can. Usually use like 7-gear ratio reel. The bigger ones can catch up faster than the slower ones can sometimes, because you got to think that fish is so much bigger and it gets one big kick out of its tail compared to those little fish. That bigger one's going to chase it down faster. Now sometimes the smaller ones will outcompete the little ones. I've had a couple times where I was throwing really big baits and I was bringing the bait in and I had 2 small fish come in like this on the bait, came up like this, and the bigger one came up between them and knocked both those guys out of the way and grabbed the bait. Unfortunately, I was on a slope like this, and I slipped on my feet, and I did not land the fish. But it was a cool eat. Pretty cool to see those bigger fish come in and just, when they want that bigger bait, it was a bigger swim bait. When they want that thing, they will come and knock everybody out of the way and get that thing. Another thing is something else I learned is always start out fishing fast if you can. If it's grassed out, throw a frog or a Cinco, the kicking frogs, or like a Texas rig type of like frog that's got like the kicking legs. Throw those out there and run them over the mats really fast. If you got mats and you got grass and all that stuff, run them really fast. If there's cheese up on there, those fish will flash up under there. You'll spook them and you'll be able to see where the fish is. Then you can throw back on them and work that bait slower, and they'll come up and they'll eat it. I've caught a lot of big fish that way this year. So start out fast. If it's grassed out, then you can slow down and start throwing those baits a little slower and work the frogs in the open area and stuff. What you're doing is you want to get those active fish first. If you can catch those active fish first, it will just blow up on it and eat it. It's kind of like bed fishing. You'll go to like 10 different beds. 6 fish won't want to touch your bait, and there's 4 of them that you just, as soon as you drop your bait in there, they just bam, they eat it. So it's kind of the same thing. And if you got open water, obviously, crankbait as fast as you can throw it. A plopper. Ploppers are kind of weird. You want to get them going at that speed where it's just making that plop, 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 plop. It's very, very technical. And what else here? You always want to fish around the moon cycles, on the good moon cycles. Now, learning the moon cycles took me a long time. You want to fish 3 days before and after full moons and new moons. I found if the moon is high in the sky, I catch a lot of like big fish. If there's no moon in the sky, it's kind of tough, unless it's around a new moon. If it's a new moon, you're going to have the moon up in the day, and if it's a full moon, you're going to have the moon up in the night. And then you got your times in between there. Right after a full moon is typically really hard to catch fish because they feed up a lot right coming into the full moon because they can see all night long. Going into and out of a new moon is a little bit tougher for them to eat because there's no light for them, but at the same time they can eat. So that's when I've learned I catch a lot of my really big fish is more around the new moon cycles. So it's something to think of. Something else I used to do is keep track of your catches. I used to write down everything on a calendar. I don't really need to now because I kind of have it on the YouTube. I do miss a bunch of videos, but I never in my mind forget like specifics of those days. There's always one thing or 2 things you'll learn throughout a day that'll stick with you. But if you can write it down on a calendar, say you're fishing in the middle of spring and you get on a bite that's like super crazy, all of a sudden you have like cloud cover come in, a certain temperature, and like certain things happen, and you have the same conditions the next year, you can go back and you can look at your calendar and you can basically like dial in a bite that way, figure it out. And once you get to a certain point, you won't need the calendar anymore, because it'll just become second nature, and these things will just stick with you, and you'll know, you'll be like, oh, this particular thing is happening, and I remember that, so let me tie this bait on, and then you'll throw it out there. Next thing you know, boom, 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 you're just catching the crap out of the fish. Yeah, don't be afraid to cast in the same spot over and over if you're pond fishing. I'll sit in one spot, make 10, 15, 20 casts in the same exact spot over and over again in those fish, because something else with bass is they do not have ears. They cannot hear. They have a lateral line on the side of their body where they feel vibration, and the vibration is what they feel when your bait goes by. So those rattles inside of like a rattle trap or a lipless crankbait or a crankbait or any of that, they're not actually hearing those rattles. They're feeling the vibration of those rattles knocking in there. And that's something I learned, is in the ponds, the fish don't have nowhere to go. They can't take off and go way off. I mean, they can, but they're typically not going to. They stick to those spots. Those fish want to stick to those spots so they can hold down that spot. They don't want to lose it to the next fish that's going to come and take over. So what they'll do is they'll sit there, and you just keep throwing that lipless crankbait or a crankbait or a spinnerbait or whatever it is through those areas over and over and over again. And what's going to happen is you're going to piss those fish off, because they keep feeling the vibration in their side, and it's going to get to a point to where they're just going to attack it and they're going to eat it. And you know, sometimes I go out to my spots and throw in between like the trees and stuff, and it'll be like first cast, boom, you catch one. Sometimes, like out at Folsom Lake, I literally kept throwing through these two bushes over and over again, and about the 10th or 12th cast, every time I caught one, it was on like the 10th or 12th cast. Bam, 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 like clockwork. Did the same thing, went over to one of my ponds right down the street from Folsom Lake, and I did the same thing, and was just throwing between the trees. Throw between the trees with the crankbait, banging off of the branches and stuff, and it took a bunch of casts, but I knew that those fish sit up on that stuff. It's a pond, where are they going to go? So you just keep making those casts through there. I caught a 3.5, and then 2 casts later I caught a 4-pounder. So just keep making those casts. Eventually what's going to happen is, not only are they going to hear it, the fish that are like kind of off in a distance, they're going to feel that vibration from a ways away, and you just keep making that same cast, and they're going to slowly come over and say, okay, what is that thing? And then eventually they're going to come right there, and then that bait's going to go in front of them. They're going to say, oh, that's what it was, and then, boom, they love the chase, so they're just going to grab it, man. Braided line and ponds, that's all I fish. Braided line, anywhere from 30-pound to 65-pound braid. I suggest going 65. The 65-pound braid I've learned from other anglers. I've watched their videos on it, and it has worked for me. Is you get the bigger braid, the 65-pound braid, what it does when it lays down on your reel, it's not going to bite into itself as much as the 30-pound braid would, because it's thicker. It lays down better on the reel. And if you're going to be fishing in a pond, you're going for big fish, there's a lot of stuff in the pond that you're going to hook onto, especially if you're shore fishing. Hook into those big ones. They're going to want to dive on you. If you got monofilament on or you got fluorocarbon, they're going to want to dive down, get in the grass, and you're going to lose them. You're going to lose them. I used to swim for fish all the time before I started getting on my raft and started floating. My buddy Rich, he would hook into a big one out at like Willow Hills Reservoir. I remember this one day, and it was a day just like today. It was all overcast, and it was during the summer, and they were just eating topwater. Every like second or third cast, we were catching a fish. He hooked into a real good one, and it got down in the grass. It was like a 4.5-pounder, and I took my shirt off and all my stuff off, and I went and I swam down, and I got that fish out of the grass. Well, right after that, we started going with braided line, and when we started hooking into them, what's going to happen with that braided line, as soon as you hook into them, they're not going to be able to get that pull and get down into that grass. As soon as they can turn their head and get down in that grass, they're going to get that grass on there, and you're going to have the fish and the grass, and you're going to be trying to pull it out. With the braided line, most of the time, when you set that hook on them, you're going to set the hook on them and turn their head instantly and get them turned to you. You want to get their head turned to you and just lift up. Nope, you don't really want to pump on the fish like that. That's like more ocean fishing stuff. You want to just straight up with your hook set and just crank that fish in, just as hard as you can. Just crank that fish straight into you, and don't let that thing have a chance to try to jump. You want it being pulled towards you with its head out of the water, doing this, but not being able to do this, if that makes any sense. You want it to kind of do this, which will keep it up out of the grass. And if you can, what I like to call jet ski them, you get them up on top of the water and you're just like yanking them in. Now, the really big ones are hard to do that. Some of those small ones, it's the same thing. You hook into a small one, they're going to go right down in that grass, and you know, you're going to lose those guys too. So braided line in the ponds, I learned that from a guy out there a long time ago. The water's pretty much stained, muddy enough out there at those ponds that you can get away with it. I even throw braid in clear water. My thinking is if you're throwing it in the right spot and you're getting that bait in a place where that fish is going to eat it no matter what, because you're forcing that fish to eat it in the wedge, you're forcing that fish to eat on that rock pile, in that shade line, on that grass, in that specific spot that you know all those elements come together, and you know that that fish is going to eat on that particular cast. I watch guys' videos on YouTube all the time, and I have people laugh at me that sit and watch the videos with me. I'm like, oh, he's going to get bit right here. And the guy will make a cast towards the sun, right along the weed line, right in the shade, right where it's supposed to be, and bam, he gets bit. Because those fish like to sit, they don't have eyelids, they like to sit facing away from the sun. In the morning, I learned over the years that the fish sit facing the west in the morning, and if you're sitting to where you're staring into the sun and making your casts, you're going to get more blow-ups fishing topwater. Same thing in the evening. If you're fishing the opposite direction and the sun's in your eyes, those fish are going to, you know what I mean? So, and then same thing in the middle of the day, the fish, when the sun's straight up in the sky, that's when those fish really get into the cover. They really get into the cover, and that's when the punch bite and the frogging bite gets really good, that I've learned going out to the Delta recently and watching other people's videos and trying to do it myself. It's not easy, man. And yeah, it's when that sun's all the way up, man, you better be dropping a Senko or punching something in the mats and in the grass. That's when the crankbaits really aren't working. Yeah, anyways, just some quick things about pond fishing, though, and that too, for all the shore fishermen guys. You know, if you can get yourself like just waders, pair of waders, that would start you off. That's like your first option. You get a pair of waders, you can start walking out in the water. If you go and you look on Google Maps, on Google Earth Maps, you can go and look back years. You go on the little history button, and you can go back and you can look at the ponds, and you can see where the shallow spots are and where you can walk out. And there's like some of these ponds, they got spots where it's only like 2 feet deep, way out there, and you can walk way out there and you can fish a lot of the pond that you can't fish from the shore. Then, you know, you got some rafts, and you got like what are they, the paddleboard type things. You can get out on the water on those. I see guys in the little tiny kayaks, like little sit-in ones. I see them out on the water on those things. They got like one pole and a little bag of Senkos, and they're out there catching fish. The float tubes, and then what else, you know, kayaks, you know, obviously a boat, you know, a boat. I've been saying this over and over. It's like you have your different levels of it, but you can't take a boat to a pond. You can take a float tube to a lake, but you can't get around on the lake. You know what I'm saying? So there's different vessels for different things depending on how you want to fish. Can't always go to Clear Lake, can't always go to the Delta, can't always go to these places. My buddy Mike and I have a couple ponds that we hit, and every time we go there, it's like third, fourth, fifth cast, we're hooking into 3 and 4 pounders. But it's, you know, sometimes you got to go to the ponds, and you go and you know you can go catch a bunch of fish. You just go catch a bunch of fish, and then when you go to the Delta, you go to some of these other spots. That's when you really try to dial in and catch the big ones. So it's almost like the pond fishing is like it's like practice. It's almost like practice. You're practicing your cast. You're practicing your hook sets. You're practicing tying knots. You're practicing making mistakes, having your line wrap around your tip of your pole all day long, having things malfunction, birds' nests all day long, sitting there for 45 minutes picking out a bird's nest. Been out there, done that. Now I have tools to do it instead of sitting there trying to do it with toothpicks. Had a time where I was picking out a bird's nest for 45 minutes, got really frustrated and wanted to leave, and I was like, you know what? No, calm yourself down. Made a cast and ended up catching a 5.5 pounder. So sometimes things work out. So if you can make it through the stressful parts of fishing, because believe me, it's not all fun and games. It's like with skateboarding. A lot of skateboard videos you watch, it looks fun and all that stuff, but then when you watch the behind the scenes and you watch them falling on their face off of a 12-stair handrail and they land flat on their freaking face, that's what we used to do, man. And that's kind of what happens with fishing. Sometimes you'll go out there and fall flat on your face and you'll want to just quit. I've had times where I've snapped poles in half. My story without at the pond, or excuse me, the creek in Roseville when I first started fishing, and I had this little spinning rod. My buddy had this little Rapala crankbait that he bought me, and I didn't even know how to tie a knot back then. His brother tied me on a little snap swivel. I snapped that thing on and went down to the creek, made about 3 casts, and I hooked into the tree. I got mad and I threw my pole in the water, and I was like, that's it, I quit fishing, and went home, and woke up the next day and I was like, man, I kind of feel like I want to go fishing. And I forgot that I threw the pole in the water, and I was like, dang, where'd my pole go? So I decided to go back. I got some old shoes on, went back to the creek, pulled the pole and the bait out of a tree, and then I decided, that's when I realized, hey, I can just walk in the water. I made about 3 or 4 casts and I freaking catch a bass, and I was just like, well, what the heck? I ended up catching like 30 fish that day, and it was pretty crazy. And that's kind of what started Urban Bass Slayers, was that day, me walking down the creek in Roseville over there, catching a whole bunch of little spotted bass. And then I started catching the pike minnows. Those things are like this big in the creek over there. And yeah, so, you know, you're gonna have your days where you mess up and things go wrong and all that stuff, especially when you're a new angler and you're just starting. Practice tying knots, practice get a jig, put it on your bait, and go out and practice pitching in your yard. All that stuff. If you live by a pond, or you can go to a pond a lot, just even if you're not catching fish, just practicing casting and all that stuff is going to make you a better angler. Don't be afraid to use a bait caster. I was afraid to use one for years because people told me you had to like cast and switch hands and do all this stuff. Do whatever feels right for you. You can cast and switch hands. I prefer to use a left hand crank with the right hand because this is my power hand and I can aim better. It's like throwing a ball for me. I can aim better with my casts, and then, you know, power's in holding the fish and then just getting them in. People say different, but it's all how you want to fish. I know guys that still just use spinning rods. Now the problem with the spinning rods is they're really floppy and they're hard to get the fish up out of the grass if you're shore fishing. So if you are using a bait caster, you're going to be able to have a stiffer rod, and it'll get those fish up, like I said, turn their head, get them to you quicker, so they can't dive down in that grass, so they can't go behind that pole or behind that tree stump or the log or whatever it is. They won't be able to pull you. You'll be able to pull them, and once you're able to pull them, you'll be able to start landing all those big fish. So, Urban Bass Slayers, thank you guys for watching, and kind of a little different video just in the backyard today. I just bought a new truck. Got a truck off my buddy Mike. Thank you, Mike. Love you, brother. The truck has actually been handed down from fisherman to fisherman. So, yeah, pretty cool. Urban Bass Slayers, appreciate you guys. Thanks for sticking with me. And get out there, go fishing. And like I said, man, if you're new to fishing, don't be afraid to go out there and fail. That's how you learn. Thanks for watching.